Tonight, I did what I had to do. I crushed one of
WWE was thrown into rare turbulence when authority figure Adam Pearce made the stunning decision to terminate Bronson Reed's contract following the post-match chaos involving Roman Reigns at Clash in Paris. What began as a high-stakes showcase between a reigning champion and a surging powerhouse became a watershed moment that reframed how WWE balances intensity with responsibility. Pearce's swift call signalled a new line in the sand. Competitive fire will always define the product, but safeguarding performers and preserving trust across the locker room comes first. As fans processed the news, emotions ran hot, some praising the firm stance as long overdue accountability, others lamenting the sudden derailment of a talent with enormous upside. One truth rose above the noise. This was not a routine storyline twist. It was a consequential decision with real ramifications for morale, perception, and the direction of WWE's main event scene, particularly for Roman Reigns' ongoing legacy. Setting the stage, Clash in Paris and the high-stakes showdown. Clash in Paris arrived with a sense of occasion that you could feel through the screen. An arena alive with a cosmopolitan roar, flags waving, and a card built to showcase championship excellence. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, walked in carrying more than gold. He carried the mythology of an era-defining reign and the expectation that he would once again bend the narrative to his will. Across from him stood Bronson Reed, whose blend of ring IQ and raw force had transformed him from promising prospect into genuine threat. Weeks of tension had primed the audience. Reigns' composed dominance versus Reed's restless momentum, a classic clash of a ruler defending an empire and an ambitious challenger trying to redraw the map. Paris turned into a crucible for reputation, with the wider wrestling world looking on to see whether the champion's aura would harden or the challenger's surge would crest at exactly the right moment. The match unfolds. Power, resilience, and a battle of wills. From the opening lockups to the momentum swings, the match was an exhibition in layered storytelling. Reigns controlled tempo with veteran composure, turning defensive moments into traps and doubling down on fundamentals that make top champions look inevitable. Reed answered with surges of pressure that had the crowd gasping, economical strikes, ring-cutting savvy, and a pace that belied his size. Each sequence became a referendum on two philosophies: Roman's "make them play your game" mastery, and Reed's "break the pattern" audacity. Counters landed clean, near falls felt earned, and both men sold the attrition without tipping into excess. It was that careful balance, credible danger without needless escalation, that had the audience invested. By the time the final bell sounded, the story had room to breathe, yet the air felt charged, as if the match had only set the table for a bigger, more complicated conversation about authority, accountability, and what comes after glory or heartbreak. The moment that changed everything. When competitive fire crosses a line. What followed the bell, the exact moment that turned a memorable contest into an organisational flashpoint, wasn't about a single move so much as the intent and escalation behind it. There's a difference between hard-fought spectacle and conduct that compromises safety or the spirit of competition. In Paris, that line blurred, then snapped, leaving producers, officials, and peers scrambling to steady the scene. The reaction inside the building told the story. Noise gave way to an uneasy hush, not because the audience wanted less passion, but because they recognised a shift from performance to something that felt unsanctioned by the norms everyone counts on. For WWE, whose brand relies on trust, between performers and between promotion and fans, this was not an angle to be milked. It was a situation to be managed, promptly and transparently, so the show's heart, risk managed with care, could keep beating. Backstage urgency, how Adam Pearce took the reins. Behind the curtain, Adam Pearce faced the toughest version of a job that is thankless on calm days and nearly impossible on chaotic ones. Pearce's reputation is built on even-keeled leadership and a bias for clarity, qualities that matter when a roster is watching for cues and social media is sprinting ahead with narratives. He spoke with medical staff, agents, and senior voices in the room, focusing first on Roman Reigns' status and then on what message the next step would send. The question was not simply what happened, but also what do we stand for when it does. Pearce understood that performers push themselves to the edge precisely because fans reward authenticity. Equally, he knew that leadership exists to enforce a boundary that protects careers, locker room trust, and the product's long-term credibility. His decision would need to be both fair and firm, transparent enough to reassure fans, and strong enough to reset norms. The decision. Why Reed's firing became the line in the sand. Pearce announced that Bronson Reed had been released from his WWE contract, framing the move as a necessary response grounded in safety, respect, and culture. It wasn't positioned as a moral indictment of Reed's character or a denial of his talent. It was a statement of standard. In addressing the roster, Pearce emphasized that WWE is a high-performance environment where physical storytelling is intense by design, but that intensity must remain tethered to professional responsibility. The takeaway was unmistakable. The company will always support fearlessness, but never at the cost of the guardrails that keep shows sustainable and careers long. Some decisions are less about punishment and more about precedent. This was one of them. It re-established the guardrails and conveyed that WWE would rather course-correct quickly than risk erosion of the trust that makes these performances possible. The fan reaction. Applause, frustration, and 1,000 what-ifs. The global fan base responded with the full palette of modern sports entertainment discourse, praise for decisive leadership, sadness for a star's abruptly halted run, and a torrent of what-ifs about how Reed's momentum could have been redirected. Supporters of the decision argued that the line must be defended or it ceases to exist. Detractors countered that counselling, fines, or a suspension might have balanced accountability with rehabilitation. Somewhere between those poles sat the majority, fans who love the rush of unpredictability but also want to trust that their favourites can perform at a world-class level without unnecessary risk. If there was a silver lining, it was the quality of the conversation itself. Thoughtful threads on safety protocols, the role of producers in high-leverage matches, and how companies can encourage bold creativity while clearly communicating "do not cross zones." Passion is wrestling's engine. Perspective is the steering wheel. Pearce reminded everyone that you need both. Wrestling's grey area. Performance, safety, and the art of staying real. Pro wrestling thrives in the grey, the space where realism elevates drama and trust makes risk possible. The goal is to look dangerous while being disciplined, to deliver impact without compromising anyone's tomorrow. That paradox is not a flaw, it's the craft. The Pearce incident became a case study in how easily the grey can darken when emotion or ambition overrides the quiet agreements that make each spectacle possible. The answer isn't to soften the product into something unrecognisable. It's to recommit to the shared techniques and communication that let performers go big and go home. Every great match is a handshake disguised as a fight. When the handshake is honoured, fans feel the electricity without the queasiness, and performers can chase greatness at a pace that sustains careers rather than shortens them. Boundaries don't kill drama. They allow it to be repeated, refined, and remembered. The Reed-Reigns flashpoint. Lessons for producers and performers. The immediate fallout spurred productive internal review, clearer cues for escalating sequences, more explicit red line briefings before high-risk matches, and an emphasis on adapting in real time when adrenaline tempts performers to deviate. For agents and producers, Pearce underscored the value of multiple contingency plans and of empowering referees as on-site governors, not just storytellers in stripes. For wrestlers, the lesson was not dial it back, but dial it in. Be precise, be audible, and treat adaptation as a skill, not a scramble. The best do this intuitively. Codifying it gives the rising class a playbook. If the industry treats Pearce as a wake-up call rather than a scarlet letter, it can turn a fraught night into a safer, sharper era where performers still take fans to the edge, just not over it. Locker room temperature, veterans, young guns, and the path forward reports from backstage suggested a divided but respectful locker room. Veterans largely supportive of the firm line, younger talent processing what it means for risk-taking and opportunity. The reconciliation lies in redefining what going for it looks like. Not bigger at any cost, but smarter under all conditions. Veterans can mentor in the micro, how to communicate in motion, how to sell without overselling, how to recognize when the crowd's rise tempts you past the plan. Younger talent, meanwhile, can push innovation safely by bringing producers into the sandbox early, testing sequences in the day, and building signature offense that looks wild but lives within practiced parameters. A great locker room is an apprenticeship culture. Pearce can accelerate that if egos yield to shared standards. In time, the divide shrinks, replaced by a collective pride that the room is both daring and dependable. What's next for Bronson Reed? Redemption, reinvention, or both? Bronson Reed's story does not end here. The same traits that made him must-see, a compelling presence, surprising agility, and a knack for big fight energy, also make him a prime candidate for reinvention. Whether that happens through a period of reflection and eventual return or via a new chapter elsewhere will depend on conversations, accountability, and timing. Wrestling loves a redemption arc because audiences do. Contrition, growth, and renewed discipline are as dramatic as any title chase. If Reed pairs his gifts with a refined framework, stronger communication habits, tighter ring boundaries, and a public commitment to the craft's safety handshake, he can come back as the best version of himself. Second chapters aren't given, they're earned. Reed has the tools to earn one. Roman Reigns, from unshakable champion to human centerpiece. For Roman Reigns, the Pearce fallout reframes a dominant reign around a human core. The tribal chief has made a career out of inevitability, turning pressure into presence and presence into power. Yet the most enduring champions also tell stories of vulnerability, recalibration, and the quiet courage to return smarter rather than simply louder. Fans will watch closely to see whether this moment becomes fuel for a return that deepens his character, measured, resolved, and more attuned to the cost of carrying an empire. If handled with care, the next chapter could be some of his best work, not a retreat from dominance, but an evolution that acknowledges limits while reaffirming leadership. The greatest legacies are not uninterrupted, they are resilient. Roman has already proven he can define an era. Now he can define what growth looks like at the top. WWE's bigger picture: policy, protocol, and protecting the magic. Institutionally, Pearce will likely accelerate changes that were already in motion. More rigorous pre-match briefings for high-risk bouts, clearer escalation thresholds, empowered referees, and reinforced medical veto power in the moment. None of this sterilizes the product. On the contrary, clarity frees creativity. When performers trust the rails, they race with more precision. When fans trust the rails, they invest without flinching. WWE also has messaging work to do, explaining standards without shaming, celebrating ambition while outlining non-negotiables. The brand thrives on being thrilling and broadly accessible. The path to both runs through professionalism. If the company uses Paris to showcase its commitment to performer welfare and world-class storytelling, the long-term effect could be additive: safer shows, smarter risks, and a fan base that feels respected as well as entertained. Final thoughts. A defining line, not a dead end. The firing of Bronson Reed will be debated for months, perhaps years, because it sits at the intersection of passion and prudence, where wrestling's heart beats loudest and leadership's duty weighs heaviest. Adam Pearce drew a line not to quiet the product, but to preserve it, making clear that WWE's best nights are built on trust, not brinkmanship. For Reed, this can be a hinge rather than a wall. For Roman Reigns, an inflection point that adds dimension to dominance. For the locker room, a reminder that the show goes on because everyone keeps faith with the handshake beneath the spectacle. Fans should expect the same thrills, the same crescendos, and the same goosebumps, delivered with the kind of craft that lets their heroes tell epic stories again tomorrow. Wrestling will always live in the grey. It endures when the people who love it agree on the borders that keep the grey from going dark.